Good morning, everybody. This is Ian Trevethan. I'm the Education and Outreach Manager here at the Sternberg Museum. And along with me is Mr. Curtis.
Not again.
Curtis J. Schmidt, our
Hi, everybody.
Zoological
Good morning.
Collections Manager. And we have some really, really cool stuff to talk to you about that was, I guess, brought to our attention a couple. And it's not something normally that you would associate with Kansas. So I'm going to flip around so you get my ugly mug out of the picture, and we are going to focus on my pal Curtis here. All right, so Curtis, what is going on? What have you got for us?
So I want to say about 3 weeks ago, a friend of our student employee, Jacob Alexander, who you guys met last week, was at Melbourne Lake and sent him a video of some very interesting creatures that she didn't know what they were. So he immediately forwarded that video to me, and my jaw hit the ground. I knew these things existed, but I had no idea they existed in Kansas. So I was extremely shocked. So with no further ado, we're talking about freshwater jellyfish. And I hope you guys can see this. They're tiny. They're about the size of a dime.
Look at that. So this is freshwater jellyfish, which is crazy. I didn't know that those were a thing. And I'm going to use your shirt as a background here. The other crazy thing is in Kansas.
That's right.
So
I had no idea.
Jellyfish in Kansas.
I knew they existed. I'd seen videos from places like Texas before. So this really prompted my interest, really got me excited. So I wanted to start doing some research on these things, especially in the state of Kansas, to see what I could come up with. And basically what I came up with was there is not squat known about these things from the state of Kansas.
Which, you know, from a nerdy scientific point of view is super exciting. Like the whole museum staff was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
So I immediately contacted everybody that I know that would be an aquatic specialist. So all of the stream biologists with the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism. They had no idea. They've never seen these things before, which makes sense because they mostly study streams, and these things are found in very slow-moving and very still waters. So we're looking at ponds and lakes and things like that, reservoirs. I also contacted the Kansas Biological Survey, who's been around for a long, long time out of the University of Kansas, thinking for sure if there's any information out there, they're going to know about it. They had no idea.
Something new.
They probably knew that they existed, and doing the exhaustive research that I've done, there are a few anecdotal reports out there, like newspaper articles and things like that, where these things have shown up sporadically, but nothing formal has been studied or published in the state of Kansas. The closest that we come to that is a study in 1999 where they actually surveyed for it, and this was with the U.S. Geological Survey in Kansas. And what they found in that 1 year, which is basically all that's out there, all the information that's out there, is they found them in 4 places. And I'm going to read those off my cheat sheet here.
You should be proud of me because you said 1999 and I didn't bust into a Prince song.
Right. So as I'm looking at my cheat sheet, I want you guys to realize that I am by no means an invertebrate specialist. This is all new to me.
It's all new to all of us. It's super exciting. It's
especially jellyfish. Who would have thought in the middle of Kansas to be studying jellyfish?
It's so cool.
Crazy. So anyway, the U.S. Geological Survey in '99 found them in a pond in Leavenworth County, a quarry in McPherson County, another pond in Riley County, and a minnow tank in Shawnee County. So where they breed minnows in a tank, these things showed up. So absolutely bizarre. And in the research that I was looking at, the first recorded evidence of these things in the state was in the late 1930s.
So they've been around for a while.
They have been around for a while. Before I get into where they come from and a little more about what they are, I'm going to refer to my cheat sheet here and give you just a little bit about the life history of these things and why they are so rarely observed. What you guys saw here and can see here, I'll give you another look. This is the Medusa form. This is basically the adult form.
So this is stereotypically what we think of when we think of
Yes.
jellyfish. You know, when your kids make jellyfish costumes out of clear umbrellas, this is what we're thinking of.
Correct. And when you think of anything saltwater or jellyfish out there, this is what you think of. Long tentacles, clear body, things like that.
So do these things, are they capable of stinging?
They are. They actually have nematocysts, just like most cnidarians do, or jellyfish. But they are so small that they can't inflict any pain upon humans. But these things eat, and these are full grown adults. These things eat zooplankton. So we're thinking things like Daphnia, copepods, things that are microscopic that we wouldn't see. So to those things, the nematocysts and the stinging cells do some damage, immobilize their prey, let them eat them. But this is the least common form that you can find these in, which is why they're so rarely seen in the state. Most of them, okay, I'm going to read to you now, are in dormant resting bodies known as podocysts. So basically they dry up and they encyst, and they can stay that way for a really, really, really long time. There's also planulae, which are larvae that are produced sexually by the adult Medusa form. Now, we don't have any of those in the United States. They've never been known to reproduce in the United States sexually. So all of the populations that we find and that we have are either all female or all male. And the reason why is because they've got another form called fistules. These are basically the little fistules, basically the little polyps that reproduce asexually by budding. So they basically split off, they become another individual. So asexual reproduction is what they do in the United States. We don't necessarily know what their common mode of reproduction is outside of the U.S.
Oh, and this is jumping the shark, but maybe reproduction might have something to do with whether a species is invasive or native?
Absolutely, and I was going to get to that here in a little bit. So if you want to hold off, just a little bit. You are jumping the gun a little bit, but I want to lead into that.
We had a conversation, just to fill you in on the other side of the screen there. We had a really cool conversation going before we started our video, which is why we were a little bit late, because Curtis and I got so excited about what this could mean and how do we define things. So one of those things we were discussing was how do you define an invasive species, which we will come back to, but that's kind of why...
We're going to bring you into that conversation.
That's kind of why I jumped the gun a little bit, was because I hadn't considered forms of reproduction. So anyways, back to what you were saying.
So in doing my research, these things are known to be native to the Yangtze River Valley in China. And they currently have a worldwide distribution. This one species is found on every single continent except Antarctica throughout the world.
And nobody is allowed to politicize this.
Just that one species. So obviously they move. How do they move is the question, and what makes us wonder what the difference is between an invasive species and an alien species or an exotic species, okay? So if they're saying that the actual native range of this species is China, but the main mode of the way these things move is in their cyst form and their polyp form on the legs of waterfowl.
That's interesting. I always imagined the Yangtze River to be a fast-flowing, sort of powerful river. And
right.
These animals...
You are correct.
They do better, you think, in slower moving?
They do, and there are very slow moving areas of that river.
Okay.
And that is out there in the literature.
Okay.
So that's where they were originally found. But can you say that the entire eastern hemisphere, if these things are moved naturally on the legs of waterfowl that are migrating?
Well, and the Yangtze is not a small river, so it covers a lot of area.
So how can you not say that entire range is their native range? So why would they be considered an exotic species? And I want to get your guys' feelings out there as well as we're talking about this.
So let's step back. And you said there were three kinds of sort of designation. There's the invasive species, the exotic species, and then you say native species. Is that correct?
Correct.
So a native species, how do you define that colloquially for our viewers that are not science nerds? What is a native species?
Sure.
How do you say that?
Sure. So a native species is a species that occurs naturally and historically in a given area.
Okay.
So if you think about the area around here, you know what some of the native species are. Western meadowlarks, plains pocket gophers, gopher snakes, bull snakes.
Curtis
like
is a
that.
native species.
Right.
Well,
I'm a
not
native
really,
species.
actually. We could argue, well, that would totally be right. Okay, anyways, so native species is something that is kind of unique, occurring naturally in a certain
Yes,
area.
occurring naturally. So non-native, also known as alien species or exotic species. Those are three words for the exact same thing.
Hold your
Are
thought just a second.
that
I need to reply to something here. Mike Everhart, we are talking about freshwater jellyfish that were discovered in a lake here in Kansas, which is sort of a new thing. So, all right, go ahead. Sorry, Curtis.
Okay, so non-native, exotic, and alien are three words for the same type of idea. And basically, those are taxa that have been artificially moved and implanted into an area they're not native, but still can persist and reproduce and start a population and thrive.
So one of the things that we were saying is that an invasive species implies that it sort of takes over a niche in another range that might displace other organisms or mess with a food web or ecosystem. Is that fair to say?
Yes. So an invasive species has a negative impact on the native species, whereas some of the non-native species aren't necessarily invasive because they're not really impacting the natural ecosystem, if that makes sense. So a good example of that locally here is the Italian wall lizard that lives over on Fort Hays' campus and the surrounding area. These are highly adapted to living in urban environments, whereas we don't really have anything else that fills that niche in towns and cities in Kansas. So there's actually been studies in other areas that show that they are not negatively impacting really any species. So they're living here, they're not naturally occurring here, so they're not native, but they're not considered invasive because they're not harming anything. Now, to take it the other direction, you guys are probably all familiar with the Burmese python situation in Florida. So that is an invasive species, an alien species that has come into the state, been brought into the state, and is now thriving and having a tremendously negative impact on the environment. It's eating everything. It's very difficult to find medium-sized to even small-sized mammals down there in the Everglades now. And the population's out of control. We'll never be able to control that population again.
And even when I was growing up in Washington State, we have lots and lots and lots of little lakes, and people would, take their boats and, go to one lake for a weekend, and then the next weekend they would take their boat to a different lake, and that was causing problems with what were they? Were the
zebra mussels?
Zebra mussels, and there were a lot of public service announcements out there saying, please, if you go from one lake to another, please thoroughly wash your boat, scrub it out, because this is a good way to transport an invasive species.
Right.
So, very interesting.
That's an excellent example of an aquatic invasive species. And also here in Kansas, zebra mussels are really, really bad to have in the environment. They outcompete the other mussels. They're very sharp-shelled and tiny. They reproduce by the millions, if not billions, and they can quickly overtake the ecosystem and cause problems. They can clog water sources or water pipes and things like that and wreak havoc that way as well. So not just impacting the native ecosystem, but also our infrastructure, our water sources can be impacted by that as well.
So, the excitement for myself and for Curtis and other members of the staff at the museum is this is really kind of a good example of science in real time, where we can have these discussions of how do you better define a concept like how to classify a species that originated in a very, very different location and a very different range. And we're talking about another continent. How do you best define this? Is it being transported naturally? Is it being transported like some of the examples that we were talking about? You know, how much have humans propagated that? So it's a really, really, really cool discussion that we have, you know, going on right now. So that's one of the, I think, points of excitement.
And with these guys, it's both. We know they both naturally move from one body of water to another, again, by migrating waterfowl primarily, but they also are moved on plants and plant material. Now, how much of that is caused by humans? Where have humans taken this thing that the natural things like waterfowl have not?
And we did have somebody comment, let me see if I can find it, earlier, one of the earliest comments we got. Kathy Ellis says Mark found some in a tank that they had, and you could barely see them. So they're clearly showing up in...
Right. So here's another thing, and I'm glad you brought that up, Kathy. I am actually working on a review of this species in the state of Kansas because, again, there's very, very little information and literature out there. Again, I've talked to so many different biologists across the state that either didn't know that they existed in the state or they haven't personally seen any. So this is a call to all you out there. If you know of anyone that's seen these things, or if you can get video of these things, because again, they're going to show up in any still body of water at any given time. It's very random, very sporadic. Again, it doesn't happen very often, which is why we don't see these things very often, because they're usually in those other forms. So let me know. Email me, cjschmidt@fhsu.edu. If you have any information on these things at all, if you've ever observed them, I want to know when, I want to know where.
And if you don't remember that email address, if you're not quick enough on the pen to write that down, you could just shoot us a message on our Facebook page saying, hey, we're looking for the guy that's working on jellyfish, and we will get you to the right person.
Or it's on our website. You can find it numerous places.
Yeah, we do have a very easy to navigate webpage. So if you click on, I think it's staff or meet our staff, it'll pop up all of the staff members with all of our relevant information. So it's super easy to get a hold of us, but at the very least, shoot us a message on Facebook. We'll get it to the right person.
So I'm going to continue doing research on this, and hopefully sometime later down the road, we can have this same conversation and I have more information for you.
So how do you suppose, I mean, you know, Kansas is by far not the coldest place I've ever lived. I mean, I grew up just about as far north in the continental United States as you can be. So, you know, I spent some winters in Montana, which is way colder than the winters are here. But we do have cold enough winters here that a shallow, still body of water would freeze over. So how do these animals get through a winter?
That's a good question.
Because
I really have no idea.
I mean, maybe erroneously, because I don't know much about jellyfish and cnidarians is what we call them.
Yep.
You know, I always associate them with warmer waters, and maybe that's erroneous. But you know, whenever I've, I guess, traditionally seen pictures, you know, it's always somebody on some tropical beach somewhere going, "Ah, look, it's jellyfish."
Right. I imagine they overwinter in their cyst form. But again, I'm going to repeat myself. They've been found on every continent except for Antarctica, and they have a global distribution right now.
So what does that mean?
Absolutely
in terms of
bizarre animals.
How we classify their distribution.
Right. So I personally, I want to get your guys' opinion on this. Do you think they should be considered native throughout the Eastern Hemisphere, throughout the world? What do you guys think? Because I personally think, since they are transported naturally, just like seeds, you know, seeds are distributed by the wind and things like that. And that's the way I consider this. That's natural dispersal. Words are hard today.
Well, at least it wasn't your own name. Well, it's interesting because, you bring up an interesting point. You got seeds that get dispersed in the wind. And when you think about systems like that, I mean, just recently we had dust from the Sahara being transported, and, basically it was over this part of the country within a couple of weeks. So with that in mind, how does that work for something like seed distribution? And a similar thing might be considered for water currents, and whether waterfowl is migrating from place to place, and it might not be just one thing. It may be a system of things.
And did it naturally jump from the eastern hemisphere to the western hemisphere? We really have no idea. It's very fascinating.
It's pretty amazing. So in your exhaustive research that you've done so far, is there any morphological differences between these critters? I mean, I don't know if that's a thing with jellyfish studying or not.
Not at all. These things look exactly the same.
Okay.
Because they are the same species, and there's no geographic variation whatsoever.
Wow. Okay.
They all look just like this in their Medusa form, which is all I know about at this point.
Okay. So to be continued. Hopefully we can follow this up in some amount of time here once more data has been collected, and everybody who has an interest in this, keep your eyes out.
Right.
If you see some of these out in the wild, let us know where they are, and
please do. That's valuable information that I need because it's not out there.
There are questions to be answered, and you can help.
And that's another great point about science is the more you learn, the more questions you have. You start with a single question, you're going to end with a lot more questions.
I am not going to be able to sleep all weekend now. I'm so excited about this.
But yeah, this is obviously the first in our collection. So this is going to get cataloged into our invertebrate zoology collection. So we're really excited to have that here. And to my knowledge, no other museum has any in the state or even in the region.
So that's cool.
So very cool stuff.
All right. Well, I think that is just about all the time that we have today.
It's all the information I have.
All
that's
the information
for sure.
we've got right
Sadly.
now. So we'll put the challenge out there. Citizen scientists, go.
Pay attention to those standing bodies of water.
Help us answer these questions. So as always, we're going to ask that you like and share our live feeds. And it helps feed our employees if you spread the awareness that the Sternberg Museum is on the job and out there educating and doing science. So I'm gonna say goodbye. We will see you next Friday. Any last parting words of wisdom?
Just what he said. Share this far and wide so that the more people that know about this, the more information I can hopefully get on these guys.
So this is a good activity to go outside and do social distancing with. It'll keep you fascinated and entertained for as long as you want, and it'll probably keep you away from the masses, which is a great thing.
If you're out there at the lake, boating, fishing, partying, whatever it is you do, just look in the water, pay attention. You'll see these things. If they're present in huge numbers, and you can see them in relatively clear water.
And if you're partying, wear a mask, please.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. Take care.